Hello students, I hope you have to seen last videos and then after in this video you have to learn about the levels of communication. There are the main 6 levels of communication: extrapersonal communication, intrapersonal communication, interpersonal communication, organizational communication, mass communication, personal communication. So there are the main 6 type of level of communication, so you have to learn about it one by one. So let's start. First one is a extra personal communication. What is the meaning of extra personal communication? Extra personal communication simple meaning, there are the communication between the human being and non human being entities is called the extra personal communication. For example, you can take this that the communication between any human and animal or object is called the extra personal communication. You have to do this type of communication also in your day to day life. Sometimes you have to talk with your pen, sometimes you have to talk with your mobile phones, sometimes you have to talk with your chairs, with your motorcycles. So this type of communication is called the extra personal communication. This communication is required the perfect coordination and the understanding between the S and R. For S is stand for the sender and R is stand for the receivers. For the perfect coordination and understanding is required if you have to do this type of extra personal communication. Then after, this type of communication is mostly done with your, we can say, some human beings have to have some type their pets, and these animals have to do this type of extra personal communication you have to do with your pets. Then after, intrapersonal communication. Intrapersonal communication means what? There are the intrapersonal communication simple meaning means take a place within the individual when you communicate with yourself only. This type of communication is called the intrapersonal communication. Like sometimes you feel bad, sometimes you feel happy. This type of communication is called the intrapersonal communication. Intrapersonal communication is simply means you have to communicate with yourself. So sometimes you have to think that I am sad today, so this type of thinking is converted messages to your brain, and your brain is send this type of message, and this your brain is give the responses. Sometimes you think that today I feel very sad, and you cannot concentrate your mind, you cannot concentrate your total work, you cannot concentrate in your work. So this message is converted to the brain. When you when you communicate your ideas, your feelings with your brain, then your brain receive this type of messages, and you know that brain is linked to the overall part of our body. So our brain is converted your ecological, or we can say there are the electrochemical system. Our brain has a one type of electrochemical system. So our brain take this type of message, and brain cannot, we can say that your brain cannot concentrate at their your work. So this type of feeling is conveyed to the brain, and brain receive this message and given the response. And you can also take the example when you feel happy, at that time your brain get this message that you have happy, and you can do your work very essentially, we can say very effectively, and your work is to be a marvelous, and your work is to be perfect. So this type of feelings is converted to brain, and brain take the messages and give the responses. Then communication is depend on your thinking. If you think very, when you think sad, then your brain is receive this message and this type of response is given to you. So communication is depend on your thinking and this type of basis of information process. Without the internal dialogue, you cannot proceed the further level of communication. So communication with the other party and the internal dialogue is required. So self motivation and self determination is also done this type of intrapersonal communication. This type of intrapersonal motivation is also done by you in your life. Like sometime you have to motivate yourself that this work is done by me and me only. I have to do it, I can do it. So this type of motivation, this type of self of pattern of depending or thinking is done in the intrapersonal communication. Then after, interpersonal communication. What is the meaning of interpersonal communication? Communication to sharing the information to among the people. This type of information or this type of communication is called interpersonal communication. So you cannot misguide in your examination. There are the intrapersonal communication and interpersonal communication. Intrapersonal communication means communication with yourself, and interpersonal communication means the sharing the information among the people. When you share the information with your friends, with your family members, with your teachers, with your professors, at that time this type of information is called the interpersonal communication. To compare with the other level, the communication level need to examine. When you do the interpersonal communication, at that time you have to examine the level of communication, which type of level you have to do the communication, and how many peoples are involved in your communication, then how many channels are used for this communication, and what type of feedback is required. Sometimes you do the interpersonal communication. At that time you have to involve your subordinate, your colleagues. And then simple meaning, what is the meaning of subordinate? Subordinate is a person who work under you, okay, under your comment. Okay, so subordinate is a person who work for you, simply meaning. And your colleagues, there are the persons who working with you. So subordinates and colleagues, there are the when you go for the organization and when you go for the meetings, at that time you have to involve the channel, or you have to show that the what are the level of the communication skill you have to use, and which channel you have to use. Sometime you have to use the meeting, through the meeting you have to communicate your with your organization. Sometime you have to do the seminars, workshops. So this type of communication is called the interpersonal communication. Then after, it can be formal or informal. Interpersonal communication is done by the formal way or informal way. When you discuss your ideas with your friends and families, is called the informal communication. And if you communicate your boss, and we can say your teacher, at that time is a formal communication. Here is an example given that the salesman to customer. So salesman to customer is a formal communication. Salesman is a given, the salesman is give the information regarding their product to the customer, so it is a formal communication. But if they given the information to their friends and families, salesman give the information to their family member, at that time this type of communication is considered in the informal communication. In the interview, you can also consider that the in interview there are the formal communication. So depending upon the formality of the situation, this level of communication is taken the different styles. Then after, organizational communication. Then what is the meaning of, first of all, what is the meaning of organization? In the organization means the group of peoples work for the same goal. Organization means what? Organization is, you cannot consider only the one people or two people. Organization means a number of people, there are group of people working for the same goal. At that time organization and business meetings are very important. If they have can in the organization, if one message is converted from the communication to miscommunication, is create the very big disaster for the organization. So communication skill is very important for the organizational manner. For example, for the large number of employees are involved in the several different activity in the organization, there are considered the various type of department, like we can say there are the financial department, managing department, then production department, then marketing department. At that time they have to communicate their skills regarding their experience, regarding their objectives. They have to communicate with the employees. At that time they have to consider the organizational communication. Communication in the organization is to be a possible even without the direct contact, because in the organization there are the various types of workers are working and various number of employees are working. At that time direct face to face contact is not possible, so they can do the contact with the internal operation and external operational. Means internal operational means they have to communicate with their ideas to their employees, through the meeting, through the seminars. And external operationals through their we can say they can give the mail or given the in the meeting like AGM, annual general meeting, they have given their organizational communication. In this type of communication you can take the example for the Reliance. Every time Mukesh Ambani, who is the CEO of the Reliance industry, they have to communicate the we can say the better we can say important. There are the important information they have to convey in their AGM, annual general meeting. So this type of communication is the very important for the organizational businesses. In the organization you can also consider there are the MNCs, there are the multinational firms. So in the multinational firms they cannot contact directly, because multinational firms they have considered their companies in the various countries. At that time they cannot contact directly, so organizational communication is very important. If the communication is conveyed to the miscommunication, or we can say convert to the miscommunication, is create the very big disaster. Then after, mass communication. What is the meaning of the mass communication? When you use the several mass media such as the journals, books, televisions and newspaper, this type of communication is called the mass communication. This in the mass communication, the message for the large audience, you have to convey your message for the large audience. They cannot any we can say in the large mass communication is a very important, because in the mass communication you can convey your message to the large number of group, you can convey your message to the overall country. For example, press interview is given by the chairman and advertisement of the any product, like you can take the example of the any product advertisement in your televisions. Then you can also take the examples for the chairman's press conference, like you can take the example for the Ratan Tata's press conference regarding the Tata's company. So this type of interviews they also convey the right message, and we can say the informative messages. Then after, in oral communication through the mass media requires some technical equipment. There such as a microphones and amplifier. You can also see that some press conference you have to seen in your televisions, and also you also seen in the movies, in the television programs. When they arrange the press conference, at that time they have to arrange the microphones and amplifiers, because the mass communication is a very important, and we can say the very trustworthiness communication. In this communication you can take the which type of message you have to take is a very valuable and very informative and very true. We can say 100% right information you can take from this mass communication. So there are the microphones and amplifiers are required for this communication. Then after, What are the characteristics of the mass communication? There are the large audience scattered over the wide geographical area. So mass communication is required when your companies is MNCs, blue chip firms. At that time, different country have a different. You have the different countries locations is different. At that time, you have to require this mass communication. Then impersonality, like the large participation are unknown to each other. In the mass communication, participant cannot known, that is not required that the all person have to feminize from themselves, but there are the large participants is required, and you can do the large participant and unknown to each other, because the mass communication is required the uh, for like through the journals and through the televisions. At that time they cannot know each other. Then presence of gatekeeper means mass communication is very important, because in this type of communication, media, internet, radio, televisions, magazines and newspapers are available. So if the manager or any we can say any managers and any chairman can say that I cannot they cannot, we can say that they cannot verify that I cannot say this statement. So media can oppose them, because media has this type of records are available with medias, records are available with their televisions, newspaper. So chairman is a give the right information and they cannot oppose that this type of statement is not given by me. So this type of communication is very important. So I hope you have to learn about the levels of communication. Thank you.